What should we take away from this meeting with the Prime Minister of Australia that has not, has been a long time coming? It has not happened until now.
Yeah, that's right. A fairly warm meeting between two men from opposite ends of the political spectrum here. The president and the prime minister announcing what I'm told by a White House official is a $3 billion joint venture project to develop critical minerals between these two countries that they believe could yield $50 billion in these minerals, which would become kind of a key piece of the economic puzzle here for President Trump, elements that are necessary for so many high-tech businesses in the United States. It relates to what was, I think, the third country present in this room, the United States' relationship with China. The president, to my ear, Kate, going to great lengths to not antagonize Chinese President Xi, suggesting that he believes, despite the back and forth over trade and a lot of kind of mutual economic saber rattling, that he does ultimately think there'll be good trade deals to be done with China, that there'll be a deal to get the Chinese to purchase American soybeans again, and that all of this will kind of work out fine despite the ratcheting up of economic pressure between the world's two largest economies. If not, that brings us back to the Australia partnership, where you heard the president and the prime minister talking about the sales of U.S. nuclear-powered submarines to the Australians, the suggestion that this military alliance between the United States and Australia, which goes back to World War I, could continue to be beneficial for both countries, buying American planes, American military technology, and so forth, which, from the Australian perspective, is partly about containing China in their neighborhood. So I think those are the big headlines around that corner of the world. To me, the other big global headline out of this was the president again pointing out that as the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel appears increasingly tenuous and fragile, with strikes resuming there, the president saying that if it doesn't stop, if the ceasefire can't hold, and he clarified the we being Israel with the U.S.'s support, would go in and forcibly disarm Hamas, essentially a resumption of that war. So not as much drama as we sometimes see in these meetings or lunches, as the case may be here, but some headlines out of the U.S. and Australian alliance, and the president, again, keeping his eye on foreign affairs in the Middle East as well, Kate.
Yeah, and just quickly, we have about a minute more, Garrett, on the Middle East. It didn't sound like we heard a lot of news there. The president doesn't seem overly concerned about the state of that ceasefire.
No, that's right. I mean, the president's general view and the White House's general view is that they have done the heavy lifting to get this ceasefire in place, and now it's up to our other partners in the region to make it hold. Some of these Gulf Arab countries in particular, with whom the president has forged relationships, need to step up in the White House's view. He trusts Israel to manage its own security, but the White House has declared victory really already in the Middle East. They need that victory to hold.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.